First of all, I thought I'd go through the reasons to grow tea roses if you aren't already growing them. Um, First of all, what they are, to separate them from hybrid teas, which many people seem to have a problem distinguishing that they're two different things. The tea roses are the descendants of the Chinese roses brought to Europe in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Specifically, there was Hume's Blush, tea scented China, and Park's Yellow tea scented China. Hume's Blush is apparently still with us. I have a plant that I got about 20 years ago that does pretty well match the one that was found in Laos just a few years ago. And I've looked at the one from Laos and took a lot of pictures, and I can only see a couple of very minor differences to my found plant, which is a complete mystery because the person who found it was Phil Edinger, who found it about 50 years ago and doesn't remember finding a rose that reminded him of Hume's Blush. He gave it to Joyce DeMitz, who gave it to me, so that's how I ended up with it. Anyway, those are the originals. There are roses sold as Park's Yellow. They are not Park's Yellow. It is apparently extinct because nobody has found anything matching the original descriptions. But it has descendants because all of the yellow teas got their yellow from that one. They grow very well in the USDA zone 7 to 9, and we're all in those zones. They don't need any supplemental water in the summer once they're established, which is very good for all of us. Their color range is where some people get turned off. They want bright oranges and solid yellows and such. And their color range for the teas is white to pale yellow or any shade of pink. There are a few red ones from later on when they were crossed with the red China roses. They come in any size you want. There are bush ones that are the same size as hybrid teas. There are tall ones that can be grown like a large bush or a small tree. And then there are climbers that you can put up the side of a wall or a fence or wherever you want something to just go as big as it can get. I've seen Lady Hillingdon cover 20 feet length of fence on a farm. And they're so easy care. That's why we find them in cemeteries and old home sites, is that they don't really require people. So those are their good traits. Next slide.
Let's see about that. That could be a problem.
Yeah.
We'll get this back. All right.
Okay. How to identify a tea rose if you find it in an old cemetery or something? The main way is through their leaves. If you look at the leaf on the left in this picture, the terminal leaflet is quite a bit larger or longer than the other ones. The bottom set of leaves are quite a bit smaller. There can be one or two sets in the middle. So they can either have 5 or 7 leaflets. But you'll also notice the two little ones point back towards the stem rather than straight out. And that's the main way I distinguish them. There's also a lot of them, the new growth is reddish, like that middle picture. And then the picture on the right is just to show the top side and the reverse side. They're usually pretty smooth on the top. They can have prickles on the back of the stem. Next slide. And we'll get into I'm going to discuss 6 of the roses. I grow 5 of them. I've collected all of them in cemeteries and at old houses and grown them from cuttings. So I know that they're easy to do that way. In cemeteries, of course, they're not getting water or pruning and they're doing just fine. So it makes them really easy care. Duchesse de Brabant was bred by Bernard in 1857. It was originally named Comtesse de la Barthe and sent to Australia. When it was sent to America a couple years later, they renamed it Duchesse de Brabant. Nobody knows why, but there's been a lot of controversy. People thought it was 2 different roses or 1 rose with different names. And that's what it is 1 rose with 2 different names. That's finally been documented. I find it in almost every cemetery. It's light pink and cupped. Makes a good sized bush, or you can grow it as a freestanding small tree up to about 6 feet or so. You can see how cupped and dark it is when it starts. It fades to a much lighter shade when it opens more. I have another slide of pictures if you want to advance it to the next one. There we go. There's a large bush in a cemetery. You can see how large it gets with no care whatsoever. It has produced a completely white sport, though this particular flower of it, Madame Joseph Schwartz, has some pink on part of it. It's like it's sporting back. But it's a bush that's completely white normally, but otherwise looks just like Duchesse de Brabant. There any questions? Does anybody want to know any more about Duchesse de Brabant or want to make any comments about it?
Does it have a fragrance?
Folks want to know if it has a fragrance.
The fragrance. Most teas have a very mild fragrance, kind of sweet. It's seldom a strong fragrance, but almost all of them have some fragrance. It does not smell like tea to anybody I know, even though they're called tea scented. Okay, can move on to the next one. Lady Hillingdon is one of my favorites. It's one of the favorites worldwide among tea roses. The large picture of the bush, that's my house. And I planted it right in front, having no idea what I was planting. I had taken a cutting at an old house, and that plant was growing in so much shade that the flower, without any sun on it, was kind of orange. And I was allowed to take a cutting, and I rooted the cutting and I put it in the ground. And after 2 years, I had a blooming plant, and it was not orange. It was yellow, pale yellow mostly. The upper right picture is a very freshly opened one that gets fairly dark. The one below it is what it looks like a day later as they fade out. It's one of the stronger smelling ones, at least quite a few people say that. Some of them will even say it smells like tea to them, but I don't know. Anyway, let's see. It generally grows about 6 to 10 feet high. It can be grown up against a wall. You might be able to get it taller if you do. Freestanding, you'd want to shape it throughout the period that is blooming. You can deadhead this almost daily because it's a blooming machine. As soon as all these flowers are done and you cut off all the deadheads, it's got buds on it the next day. So you want to just prune it to the height you're willing to live with. With teas in general, you don't give them a winter pruning like you do with hybrid teas. You just cut back every time you're deadheading, you reshape the plant to the shape you want, pretty much. Or a little bit smaller so that it has some room to grow. Any questions on Lady Hillingdon?
That's it, but what I was told was the Lady Hillingdon had sort of dark purple stems that were very heads and flowers. Is that right?
Want to repeat that question, babe?
It does have purple stems. Was that
Jill,
all in the question?
Jill, I had a question for you. Is there a distinct climbing form, or is it just a Lady Hillingdon that can get tall?
I've heard there's a small bush form. I've never seen one. Everyone I know has been climbing. But I have heard there is a small bush form that would,
Jill,
yeah.
can you hear me? Yes,
Yeah.
I have a friend that has the climbing version of Lady Hillingdon.
And how big does hers grow?
I I'm not sure. Probably under
Mine's
20.
about 7 feet, but if you measured the cane, as they spread out, they
Yeah,
get to
she's
eight
in
or
the Bay Area. Sandra Bier. Yeah, she lives in Pleasanton. So
ah. Anyway, yes, it's a great plant. I love it. I've had it for 30 years, I think. It still climbs. I have to cut it back to keep it off the stairway. I have to cut it back on the other side because there's a Sally Holmes over there. And there's also a Rubens under it that gets a lot of shade from it. We move on to the next one. Anna Olivier. I found this plant in our local cemetery originally. It was growing in nearly complete shade, and where I planted it also became in nearly complete shade. And so now it's decided to grow up the side of my pergola and bloom up on top of the pergola. So it can climb if it's looking for sun. Normally it's a large rounded bush. The picture on the left is my other plant, which I found growing in full sun in an empty lot. And at the time I took the picture, it only had one flower on it. If I took the picture today, there'd be a lot more. These are all from my plant, all the close-up pictures. The outside tends to be somewhat pink, and the inside is a very nice, creamy, almost pink color. And it's highly variable in just how creamy or how pink it gets. There's also a darker sport of it called Lady Roberts. And I've seen bushes that growing in Australia that were like half Lady Roberts and half Anna Olivier. And it was just kind of random throughout the plant, which was very unusual for sports. Let's see, this bush gets about 6 feet high before I trim it back. It'll get quite a bit wider. I just trim it back so I can still walk around it. Has anybody else grown that one? Not very common, but it's well worth growing if you can get it. Can move on to the next one. Madame Lombard. I've seen it spelled with an O, Madame Lombard, like Lombard. That's incorrect. As far as I know, the original is with an A, but you'll see it both ways. It is one of the most variable roses there is. Color can be anywhere from pale pink to dark, almost red, deep pink. The form, you can see one of them is the petals curl back, others the curls kind of quill. They sometimes swirl around, other times they just kind of separate into quarters or so. For that reason, we probably have 5 or 6 of them in the Heritage Rose Garden under the names they were found, because nobody recognizes it when they first find it. They have to grow it around another one and go, oh, they're the same thing. So it's been grown as Sawyer plot and Standiford plot and there's the Daubenbis plot in our local cemetery, which is where my plant came from. I have a couple more slides with more pictures of it if you want to switch to the next slide. These may all be from my plant at different times. My camera isn't very good at red, so some of these are darker than they look, deeper pink. But in that the right-hand picture, these 2 flowers of completely different colors are in the same picture. They were blooming at the same time. The plant wants to be big. It'll grow up a tree. If you've got a tree, it will climb it. If it's kept freestanding and you don't want it to flop over from getting too tall and not having support, you'll have to prune it back to about 6 feet to keep it manageable. The one in the Soquel Cemetery eventually fell over, and now it's growing new canes at the base, coming straight up, and then it's lying down for about 10 feet along the plot and then coming up at the far end as well. So it doesn't look as picturesque as it used to. So I'm encouraging the new canes so that we can cut off the fallen parts. One more slide of these. I'm not sure where I took the pictures of these bushes, but the insert I think is from mine. Since it's growing up under a tree, it often has very dark flowers on it. Out in the open, a lot of them are a lot lighter. But it's one of the most floriferous ones, I think. It's almost constantly in bloom. Has anybody grown it?
At the O.
Elaine says it's growing at the Owen Rose Garden.
Oh, good. Okay, the next one, moving on. Archduke Joseph. This one was mixed up with Monsieur Tillier, still is in a lot of places. Archduke Joseph will grow a very large rounded bush. It's not a climber per se, but mine's a good 8 or 9 feet tall in the center. And that is my bush in the photograph. It tends to be a dark, almost red color, at least when it starts. It can fade to a lot pinker. Again, my camera doesn't show it as dark as it should. The insert's a close-up of a fresh one. The distinguishing characteristic between it and Monsieur Tillier is that Archduke Joseph often gets salmon or copper color, mostly towards the middle, and it tends to remain slightly cupped. And there's one more slide of this. There on the upper left, you can see the coppery color that it takes on. It's another picture of my bush in the middle. So looking straight on, I would be right in that middle section of bloom, and the others are taller than me. And sometimes they fade out to kind of a light salmony, coppery, yellowy almost color. And Monsieur Tillier doesn't do that. The last one is Monsieur Tillier. Switch to that. It may sometimes be cupped, but usually it curls, the leaves curl back or the petals curl back. So it opens more flat. And the color is pink to dark pink, usually dark pink. My camera again. So those are all my slides. Yeah, there are people who have been convinced that Monsieur Tillier and Archduke Joseph were the same rose, and they definitely are not. In some countries, they've got them switched. I think New Zealand is still switched. Australia, I think most of the Heritage Rose people have figured it out, which one's which. Or at least they may just have Archduke Joseph and not have Monsieur Tillier at all, and have something else they're calling Monsieur Tillier that is, I'm not even sure it's a tea rose. I know I've seen something that was not it, that somebody said, some authority was claiming it was. Anyway, more questions, discussion.
All right, I'll leave the share up in case people want to go back. And folks online, you can drop your questions in the chat and we'll take questions from the room.
I just wondered about this book that I just sent for from Australia. I can't think of the authors, but there are 5 or 6 authors. I wonder what she thinks about.
Tea roses.
Yeah.
Tea roses,
Yes,
Australian.
I know all of those women. Unfortunately, 2 of them have passed away since the book was written. I first got Anna Olivier identified through correspondence on Garden Web with one of the authors of the book. I didn't meet her until several years later, 2005. They all came to a conference we had in El Cerrito. So I got to meet them all then, and I met most of them again in Australia at conferences out there. Lynn Chapman was the one I knew that was able to figure out Anna Olivier.
It's a good book, do you think?
Oh, it's a great book.
Good.
They have all the discussion about all the things they used to tell what a rose was, to identify it, because they were finding them all over in cemeteries and old properties, just like we have. And even more so out there, because it's a hotter climate. There's a lot more of the found roses are teas.
Thank you.
And we grow an awful lot of them here. There aren't too many that they have that we don't.
All right. We have a question in the chat about the water needs of teas. Do they need lots of water? Do they grow in hot weather?
They love growing in hot weather. And once they're established, I don't water them in the summer at all. My 8 or 9 foot Archduke Joseph has not seen a hose in the last 20 years. Lady Hillingdon doesn't get any water because my hose doesn't reach that far. The spigot's on the back side of the house. So they can, once they're established, they can survive on your winter rainwater alone.
Great. So there's a question about how hardy they might be in Oregon.
I know people who grow them in places that do get some snow in the winter. They, unless you get, hard frosts and thick snow, they probably will do just fine without any particular protection. No more than you would do for hybrid teas.
Great. More question. Oh, here's a question in the back.
Started, we have a rose in the tea section that has some debate as to whether it's truly a tea, and I wanted to get your input on it. And excuse my French pronunciation, but I think it's called Francis du Bril.
Francis de Bruy.
Okay, that is not a tea rose and it is not Francis de Bruy. It is Barcelona, and I think it's a 1930s hybrid tea. They've been confused in commerce forever. Francis de Bruy, as far as we know, doesn't exist. So treat it like a hybrid tea and you'll be fine.
More questions. Looking in the chat, I'm not seeing any more.
I could say something about Greg. Greg told me because he visited in June and a lot of our roses had been hit hard in the winter at the Owen. And a lot of the tea roses, they're only like 2 feet tall because they do get hit hard when we have a freeze. But then they
Right.
come back. So if he had come 2 months later, then they're thriving. We have
Yeah.
a Pot de Leon doing really well, but our Madame Joseph Schwartz is about a foot tall. So, but also they have trouble with their watering system. So I think they do need a little more water here in the summer because they're not that established. So that's just
Yeah, and if they're also out in full sun, most cemeteries have some trees around that shade them somewhat, so it doesn't get quite as hot.
Mhm.
I live in Santa Cruz, so full sun usually has fog at night and sun for part of the day, but not all day.
Jill, I had a question for you. Have you seen many tea roses up in the Gold Country in California?
Yes, yes. In fact, let's see, these, I think Archduke Joseph and Monsieur Tillier, I probably got both of those up there. Madame Lombard, that's in almost every cemetery, and so is Duchesse de Brabant. Trying to think what other ones I've seen up there. Prince Plot tea, also called Angel's Camp tea. That's hot, dry summers, went through a 5-year drought where they turned the water off completely. They usually had summer water there, but they were told not to use it. So plant's still fine, all 3 of them there. Yeah, the Gold Country was just full of tea roses. Some of them have died since I first started growing them and finding them up there. But for the most part, they're still surviving. Let's see, what roses are the least low maintenance? Meaning the least maintenance or the most maintenance?
I would suspect the least maintenance, or maybe it's the other way around.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing, the double negative. Oh, from most to least. Um, I don't know of any that are high maintenance. I know I had a fair amount of trouble getting Rosette de Lizzie established. That took a long time. Um, let's see, least maintenance, yeah. Lombard, Archduke Joseph. Um, Lady Hillingdon doesn't. Some of them, once they've established their initial bush, they don't put out new basal canes. And that can be a problem if they're not going in the right direction and you'd like to like cut back on something. It might be problematic. So you want to encourage as many canes going the directions you want them while they're still young. Because when they get old, they tend to be like tree trunks. Yeah, they're two or three canes that you have are the only ones you're going to have.
People always say, they don't like to be cut hard. But when I'm, like you said, you shape it as it's blooming, right? When you're deadheading it.
Right.
So I always
Yeah,
just
they're
take it back to a side branch and, and not chop it too hard. Like I don't just chop it in half. I just kind of thin it. Does that seem
yeah,
like?
that sounds like a good plan. The ones that make the big round bushes, of course, you don't really have to worry about them not producing any more new basils. Do we grow Sombrui tea rose? Yes, we have one plant that came from the one in Capay Cemetery, the George Washington Richardson grave plant. I don't know if vintage roses, they had the one from the Santa Rosa Cemetery. And we've had that one as well. And I noticed last week that that one has died, but we still have the one from the Capay Cemetery. And I've got another rooted cutting from that one to put in to replace the one from Santa Rosa.
We have it at the Owen, but we have one plant. I don't know where it came from. But it's about 3 feet tall and it's pretty floriferous.
Yeah. Yeah, that one, of course, was also confused with the Sombrui Climber, which is a rambler and not a tea rose at all. Let's see, I saw a question from Faith in the chat that I didn't get to yet. But now I can't remember what the question was.
Oh, it looks like there's a question from Faith about if these roses sucker.
All of mine are own root. So if they sucker, it's a new basal cane. That's the only thing they get. I don't have any grafted roses. There's no reason to graft a tea rose.
I think we've
Any
exhausted.
more questions?
Doesn't look like, well, oh, Elaine has an endless supply of questions.
Question, when will you come to visit us?
I don't know. It'd be
Stay at
nice to
my
come
house.
up there and up to Portland and up to Seattle and up to Vancouver Island and hit all the gardens on the way.
West Coast road trip.
Yeah. Have, the problem is springtime, there's always something going on somewhere. If there's a world conference it's going to be usually in May or early June or late May, which is when they're blooming here.
Right.
I haven't been able to do inventory in the once blooming roses in years because I'm never there when they're in bloom.
Jill, I'm curious, what's the current status of the garden there in San Jose? Is funding stable? Are you getting
There
your
is funding. I have a fair amount of funding saved up because we've had so many problems since COVID. First, there was the homeless camp, which was surrounding and partly inside the rose garden. That's been vastly reduced right around the garden, but across the street, Columbus Park has been the largest homeless encampment continuously. They got rid of most of the tents, but it's still full of rundown RVs, and they're just starting to move them out now. They've been ordered to remove them all. So hopefully in another month we will stop having some of the people there are undesirable, not all of them, but there are some. And we didn't have a gate anymore for people to stop people from driving in or parking in the parking lot overnight. They've finally decided to put a gate on the far side of the parking lot so that people cannot come in at night. And that's going to cut way down on the Friday night entertainment, which means the Saturday morning we have to pick up all the trash all over the garden. So things are getting better there. The other problem we had was 3 years ago, the water mains from the city broke and we had no water for 7 months. So also our own irrigation system was so badly chewed up by the squirrels that we couldn't keep up with the repairs. And they've since come up with this flexible PVC, so we don't need to use the old irrigation black tubing. But it takes a long time to get that all laid out. It's been done almost entirely by Ken Ferris. 1 or 2 or 3 days a week, he'll come in and put another line in. So it's taken about 2.5 years, I think, to replace all the tubing. It's just about done. He has to drill holes for it to emit water. Can't just use a little punch thing like you do with the old tubing. You have to actually get a drill to drill into the PVC. But we're just about back on having, well, we need to replace almost all the hybrid teas. They didn't like going several summers with irregular watering. The all the found roses were fine. All the old garden roses, the European ones, they were all fine. Most of the shrubs were doing fine. But the hybrid teas just ate it. So we've got a lot of bare area. I do have the money to replace them. It's finding them that's going to be the problem. 35 years ago when they were originally being imported or purchased, a lot of them were a lot easier to get. So the status is we plan to get it back on track, but the hybrid teas and to a lesser degree the floribundas, we need to replace an awful lot of them. So we need to locate somebody who's got them. There are people who have collections like Vintage, of course, and Beth Hannah, who coordinates somewhat with Vintage, Friends of Vintage Roses. They both have large collections, so we will get it back. But I'm kind of loath to plant much until all those RVs are gone from Columbus Park.
Great. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. I was really happy when you agreed to speak with
You're
us.
welcome.
And I just love starting our rose season with your talk about a class of old garden roses. Especially because here also people mix up the hybrid teas and teas a lot. I hear people call them, they say, oh, I grow teas. And there was an American Rose Society group here until the late 90s, I think. So until I started the Heritage Rose Group, you know, they just, I think, abbreviated the name. So I love that you're helping to educate people about that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Well, it's been nice chatting with you and meeting you.
Thanks again, Jill.
Guess we can turn me off now.
All right. You have a good night.
You too.